What if I told you this one thing could be the difference between you getting state pension in retirement or not? Would you listen? An article on This Is Money suggests that 1 in 3 workers fear state pension will be gone in 3 decades. The majority do not believe the state pension provides a decent income in retirement, though only 20% knew roughly how much the full rate is at present. Both the Tories and Labour have voiced support for the state pension by promising to keep the triple lock, which means the state pension should increase every year by the rate of either inflation, average earnings growth, or 2.5%, whichever is highest. Well, this could be scrapped in future, albeit I suppose the risk of this would be quite low, because any party saying that they won't keep the triple lock is likely not going to do that well. Although when we consider the overall cost demand of state pension on the UK's finances, then there may be a reason for them to do so, albeit they might do it in a sneakier way. Over time, the value of the state pension may be deemed as less. Now, I know it says here that it's linked to inflation, but let's say, and let's just humour the idea here, that the inflation figures provided by the government don't necessarily represent the lifestyle that you live. This might mean that money now is going to be worth significantly less in the future than what the inflation figures represent, albeit you can put this on the counter argument and say the opposite effect as well. But a poll of 3,000 working age people weighted to be nationally representative found that 11% think the state pension will definitely exist in 30 years' time, 33% think that it will not, and 25% are unsure. Now, as an individual that is in my early 20s, I'm 23 to be precise, I do not believe state pension will exist in the future. I think as an individual I need to be intrinsically driven and therefore can't rely on a government handout in retirement. Now, I completely understand, and I'm not judging people for taking state pension. After all, you've likely worked very hard to achieve it. My point is that I can't rely on just that in retirement, especially when we consider the overall spending power effectiveness and the limited lifestyle that I would be able to live. Therefore, I think it is extremely critical that an individual, especially of my age, I think these individuals would need to consider strongly maximising their pension contributions and also considering the idea of investing monthly into a globally diverse index fund so that they can therefore grow their money over time and hopefully have a bigger retirement pot to live off of. However, on the complete contrary to what I've been saying here, people have been saying for quite a long time that state pension won't be around for years. So really take it with a grain of salt. The report says the fact that the state pension is so important for many people's retirement income means that it would be incredibly difficult without enormous increases in private saving to meet a good standard of living in retirement if the state pension or something similar did not exist. In many ways, the state pension provides a bedrock for income in retirement, on top of which people can build private pension entitlement. The survey found that 41% expect a bad income in retirement, 15% do not expect to retire until their 70s, and 13% say they will never retire. I'm part of the category that believes I will never retire. I'm not saying I will never retire because I can never afford to. As an individual, when I've got too much spare time, I'm getting actively stressed because I want to be doing something productive. So I can find it very hard to relax, which I guess is my downfall. There was also gloom about future rises in the state pension, despite the two main political parties' commitment to the triple lock and the 10.1% hike in line with inflation last year. Some 11% of those polled think that state pension will increase faster than inflation over the next 10 years, compared with 38% who said it would rise more slowly. This might suggest that a few understand the impact of the triple lock, or perhaps don't expect it to be in place for much longer. Although that does really depend on what the inflation figures are presented by the government and whether that actually represents true inflation. But the report adds that there is much better understanding of the state pension age, which is currently 66, and set to rise to 67 by 2028. What's not to say that this isn't going to keep increasing? Now, we know by 28 it's going to be 67, but for someone that's not going to be at retirement for another 40 years, well, they could really crank this number up, especially as life expectancy increases over time. That's a real concern, because it could mean that, state pension age is at 75 by the time I retire, and now I'm working for a much longer period of my life. Another big consideration is, what if the government extends the number of years that you need to have to qualify for the flat rate state pension? It says here that workers need to have 35 years of contributions to get this new flat rate, which was compared to 30 years to get the old state pension. What's not to say that the government doesn't continue to increase this in future, making it even harder to be eligible for state pension. The report found widespread agreement that the state pension does not provide a reasonable standard of living, with 73% saying that it does not and 14% saying that it does. My biggest concern is that there is a big risk that in the future state pension will become means tested. The idea here that state pension will likely not exist in the same way in the future as it does now, which could potentially mean that 80% of us in retirement aren't eligible for state pension. Individuals that have a low income likely could be eligible for state pension, but if they put a cap on it, almost like universal credit where the current limit is £16,000 in total assets, or you are not eligible for it, well, they might say, well, actually, yeah, as a retiree, you need to have less than £10,000. If you have less than £10,000, you're now eligible for state pension. And it may even go a step further where it's scaled. Well, actually, the closer you get to zero in assets, the more we'll give you in state pension, gives the government a very good way of saving money and you a supplement to your income. If the government were to suddenly just say, well, actually, we're not going to give you any state pension funding unless you have less than this asset value, well, then that's a real big concern there, because it means that we're going to have less money as we get older and less to pass on to the next generations. And I'm not even talking about inheritance tax. Now, let's say you're concerned about state pension not existing in the future. Well, what would I do as an individual, as a 23-year-old? Well, I personally would be looking to save and invest a paycheck the moment I am paid. So I might say automatically I'm going to transfer out 25% of my income and invest this in a broad-based index fund over a longer period of time, aka 30 years, and build up a sizable retirement pot that I can draw down upon in the future. This means that I am more agile, more defensive, because I don't have to rely on primarily state pension. If I have streams of income, aka a side hustle, or let's say your own business where it can generate this income, well, then you can keep paying yourself a salary and continue on into retirement. When we look at this article from a different perspective, we could just say that 2 in 3 workers do believe state pension will be around, and I guess that gets rid of the whole sensationalist aspect of the article. HMRC has been cracking down on ISA investors. If you want to know how this impacts your ISA portfolio, then click the video right here.